Yes, utilize this time. Right.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock here at the Mill and Lake Stevens, April 8th, 2025. We are live. This meeting is being broadcast, and it will also be recorded for posting on our city's YouTube channel later. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order, and can I please have you join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Keep changing.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of
the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and Clerk Chelling, can I please get a roll call?
Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peters Hagen,
Present.
Councilmember Donahue,
Present.
Councilmember Shipman,
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad is absent tonight, Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
and Councilmember Tagent is absent.
Okay, could I get motions? Can we excuse two in one motion, or do they need? Okay, can I get a motion to excuse council members Jorstad and Tadge?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. So that brings us to approval of the agenda, which I will turn over shortly to Council Vice President Shipman. But as I understand it, we do have a couple of changes to the agenda that need to be made.
Yes. Can I go ahead or do it?
Yes, City Clerk Chelling, could you please describe those changes?
Okay, yes. So City Administrator Jean Brazel, as well as HR Director Anya Warrington, and our Public Works Analyst Lori Erickson are at a conference. They're online right now via Zoom. They have respectfully requested that we move up 2 items on the agenda so that they can then log off and attend an event at the conference this evening. So those 2 items are action item D, the Community Transit Bus Stop ILA that Lori would like to speak to, as well as the executive session for collective bargaining. And that executive session is expected to be 5 minutes, so it'll be quick. My recommendation would be to do this after citizen comments. Just out of fairness, if somebody's commenting on the community transit ILA, we give that opportunity. So immediately after citizen comments, your preference whether to take the action item and then executive session or the other way around, either way.
Okay, can I get a motion to
I move to
approve?
change the agenda as requested.
Second.
All those in favor? Oh,
Aye.
any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Okay, so I think we have an approved agenda. So shall we move to the citizens' comments?
Thank you.
Is it-
Yes,
Yeah,
citizen
okay.
comments, and then let's go ahead and go into executive session for the 5 minutes. We'll come back out. We'll take care of the community transit ILA, and then we'll go back to our original agenda.
Okay, so let's go ahead and start online. Do we have any citizens waiting online?
I don't see anybody. So if you were on the Zoom meeting and you'd like to speak to the council, if you can raise your digital hand, I can bring you into the meeting. Nope, not seeing anybody.
Okay, any green sheets? Anybody in the audience that would like to comment? Okay. Looks like, so no citizen comments. So then go ahead and you said proceed. We're going to go with the executive session first.
Yeah, let's go ahead and recess to executive session for collective bargaining. For those online, there's a Teams link that we'll need you to switch over to right now. Be approximately 5 minutes. So let's say 6:10, just to give us a minute to transfer over. So we'll go ahead and the rest of us will need to clear the room unless you're involved in the confidential session.
For only 5 minutes.
Okay, let's do a quick sound check. Jean, can you hear us back on Zoom?
Yes, I can.
Great, thank you. If we go to action item D, the Community Transit Bus Stop Shelters Facility License Agreement, and I believe Lori's up to present.
Awesome. Just getting my camera turned on here and I will share my screen. Okay, here we go. Good evening, Council. I am Lori Erickson. I'm the Public Works Analyst. And tonight I will be doing this presentation on the Community Transit Bus Stop Shelters Facility License Agreement. Here is a high-level overview of the topics that I will run through with you tonight. I will spend just a couple of moments going over some brief background, and then I will summarize some of the key points in this facility license agreement. From there, we will cover some of the benefits and challenges that I ask you all to consider tonight. After that, I will show you a map of the 2 proposed bus shelters that we are looking at installing should this agreement be approved. After that, I'll do just a quick run through of a couple of the high-level processes that we should be aware of if we enter this agreement with Community Transit. I will make a recommendation and then do a call for questions. All right. So starting with the background, here we go. All right, so Community Transit is proposing a facility license agreement with the city to install and maintain bus stop shelters. We'll get a chance to look at what these bus stop shelters will kind of look like in a later slide, but essentially they will be a standardized asset for us to consider. This agreement was drafted in collaboration between Public Works and Community Transit. We started talking about this about last September-ish, and we've been working on it off and on up until this point. The 2 locations that we are looking at have current bus stops, but they currently do not have shelters. And again, I'll show you where those locations are. They're kind of near the downtown area. And finally, we are kind of like pioneers in this journey with them. This model agreement will likely serve as a template for future partnerships between Community Transit and other municipalities. We happen to be the first one that have gotten this far in the process with them. So next, I will kind of summarize some of the key points in this summary. And if you want to read the agreement, from start to finish, it is in your packet as well. But the 3 things that I'll cover include the shelter installation and use, cost and maintenance, and then liability and termination. So starting with shelter installation and use, Community Transit is licensed in this agreement to install, maintain, and access 2 transit passenger shelters on city-owned property in Lake Stevens, with no significant expansion of 120 feet of the licensed area. Now, this initial agreement is just for the 2 shelters, but should we decide to enter this agreement and do future agreements, we'll have the chance to work with them to decide where those future stops are and go through a prioritization process. I'll cover a little bit more of that towards the end of this presentation. Up next, we have cost and maintenance. So the city in this agreement would be agreeing to pay $15,600 for 2 shelters. That's not per shelter, it's in total to get both shelters installed. While Community Transit, I'm not sure why it keeps going forward, will maintain the shelters for the estimated 10-year lifespan of the shelters, including annual inspections and as needed repairs within asset value limits. So for example, if that bus shelter gets tagged or has some sort of damage to it, we would have a process to work with Community Transit and they would come out and maintain those bus stop shelters. And then finally, liability and termination. Community Transit will be assuming liability and must restore the site if they're doing trenching during the installation of the bus stop shelter. Either party can terminate the agreement with written notice, after which Community Transit would be removing the shelters and restoring the area within 90 days of that termination. So up next, I'll cover some high-level benefits for us to consider if we enter this agreement. The first benefit is that this would be encouraging the use of mass transit and shared transit. So obviously we have weather we have to deal with in Lake Stevens, and these shelters would offer a space for folks to get out of the rain and a little bit out of the wind. And it also enhances the visibility and presence of the bus stop location. Right now, these locations have pads that are there. They're concrete pads, and there are signs that say what the bus stop number is. However, these just make it even more evident on where to go to reach the bus. Second area to consider are the focus areas. Bus stops located along routes with less frequent service. And this would be part of the prioritization process for where bus shelters would go. So areas that have less frequent stops of those buses are likely areas that we would want to consider in partnership with community transit for where to have these shelters installed. And then also sites with sufficient right-of-way to accommodate a shelter pad and an adjacent accessible path. So we would just want to make sure that we've got room in a logical place for these to go. And finally, we would reduce maintenance burden for public works. So essentially, we would be doing like cost sharing with community transit to get these shelters installed. But the good news is that Public Works would not have to maintain them if they get tagged with graffiti or if there's any damage. Community transit would be picking that up. And community transit will maintain to their service level. And I'll cover a little bit about what we understand about their service levels here in a future slide. And then the flip side to the benefits are the challenges. So we have just a couple of challenges that we ask council to consider tonight. The first is that sometimes these kind of shelters will draw unwanted or disruptive behavior, including vandalism, graffiti, loitering, littering, etc. And then we have the community transit service levels to consider as well. So service levels may not necessarily meet our city standards or our desires. For example, same-day response for harmful graffiti. It's not guaranteed at this point that community transit will be able to meet that kind of service level agreement with us. The final thing to consider is that sometimes shelters like this provide or create rather a sense of urbanization. Our town has vocalized that they really appreciate being a small town or having that small town feel. So something to consider with this is how the sense of urbanization might impact our community. All right, so now I will cover what the two locations are with this specific agreement that we're proposing tonight. So the first location is technically part of the Roundabout project. And you can see that they're towards the top of the map on 20th Street Northeast. So this would be an eastbound bus stop. It's bus stop number 1633, located on the north end of 20th Street Northeast, between Main Street and 123rd Avenue Northeast. The second location is pretty close to the elementary school there. And this is actually a replacement of a shelter that used to be at that location. And this is the northbound bus stop number 2753, located on the east side of 127th Avenue Northeast, close to 18th Street Northeast. And you can see the location there towards the bottom right corner of the map. Up next, I will cover some high-level information about the community transit processes. So the first, I'll cover service requests. And a definition of a service request is essentially when we need to make a phone call or some sort of formal request to have them come out and do service on that bus shelter due to damage, graffiti, etc. So things to know here is that the city or resident or rider would submit a service request, or they would call customer service to initiate that engagement. And things to know here is that the response times vary. So community transit does not have a fixed service level agreement yet for this kind of response. However, typically what they are experiencing is that repairs or service requests are addressed within a few weeks. They do have some seasonality that they experience, so sometimes those lead times for a response can take longer than that. The other thing to take note of is the requesting of new shelters. So a city or resident writer would submit a service request or make a call to customer service saying, hey, we would like you to consider putting in a new shelter at this location. These requests are then reviewed by Community Transit and they are prioritized. They have a series of things they look at for prioritization, including ridership. So how many folks are actually utilizing that specific stop and that route. They also look at these proposed projects with an equity lens. They consider performance. And they also look at the area to make sure that it would be within like ADA compliance and that it would be a feasible place to put a bus shelter. The city would be notified of the shelter priority and potential cost sharing, in which case it would trigger another agreement, just like the one we're talking about right now for the 2 proposed locations. And then finally, the city would approve the shelter location and reimburse Community Transit for the shelter materials and purchase of those. So ultimately, what we are recommending is that council authorize the mayor to sign the facility license agreement with Community Transit. And I'm happy to take any questions and try my best to answer those for you if anyone has anything to ask.
Lori, this is Councilman Daughtry. Being on the CT board, I was appraised of this a couple of weeks ago. The one question I do have is on the service agreement. There is a contracted company that goes around and cleans the bus shelters. Is that included in this? Are they cleaning it? I think it's like once every 2 weeks they hit each of the different areas.
That's a good question. I am aware that they do regular maintenance and they have a cycle for that. I could follow up though with our contacts over at Community Transit to verify if cleaning happens on a regular cadence like what your understanding is.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Laurie.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Do we have license agreements regarding the other bus shelters that are around town?
That's a good question. My understanding is no, but I can confirm that again with our Community Transit partners. My understanding is that this is the first of its kind as far as going down this route of having our partnership like that and this type of agreement.
As far as I know, that's correct also. This is a pilot project.
So
CT.
Community Transit is requesting this licensing agreement.
Correct.
That.
Yeah.
I guess second question regarding location number 1, you indicated that's an eastbound, I believe it's a westbound bus stop. And how is that incorporated in the plans for that property with that multifamily development that will take place sometime in the future?
So that's a good question. I can verify if it's eastbound or westbound. I took the description directly from the agreement, but you are right. It does look like the direction is westbound. So I will verify that and we can update that if that's incorrect. And then as far as your other question, that sounds like a great question, maybe either for Director Halverson or Kim Klinkers, if you have any insight on that. The intention with location number 1 is that it would be part of the roundabout project, but I don't have much other detail past that.
Yeah, I see. It says it's eastbound.
Oh,
So are they going to put
Okay.
it across the street from the existing one? Is it going to, if it's
not based on the
eastbound,
map.
is it going across the street from the existing bus stop? Because there's a bus stop there already that's westbound. So is this going across the street or are they revamping the current
Meaning on
one?
the south side of the street rather than the north side?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's supposed to
Yeah.
be it's supposed to be an eastbound
Yeah.
according to the ILA.
because it's currently westbound.
Yeah.
As you're driving, you're headed
Right.
towards Lundin.
So that would make my second question mute at this point. So
Um,
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I don't know, can you hear me? Just fine.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this bus stop shelter location wouldn't be constructed until the roadway improvements associated with the roundabout at Main Street and 20th Street Northeast are complete. So we'll sort of bank this and as we're working through the process, redesign that area and locate a bus stop shelter in that vicinity.
Just thinking about this in a comment, I guess with the traffic problems we have with the Viking Drive-In on 20th Street, of all that traffic backing up on 20th at weird hours of the day, I mean, it just seems like it's not a good location if you're putting it on the south side, being a westbound bus stop. Those cars back up into that area, waiting for their to-go food at the Viking, is the Viking Drive-In or the Chicken
The
Drive-In?
chicken.
And so I would say that's not a very good location for, you're just creating a conflict of bus stopping and people. I know the cars aren't supposed to be there, but they are.
Right. We're gonna work through design of that element of the project. There's a queue lane there that we've talked about and incorporated in the roundabout design. So that might not be the final location. It could be farther to the west or perhaps to the east. So when we get to that part of the design of the roundabout, we'll bring that back to council and we'll talk about that very issue.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm Councilmember Shipman, and I had just a few questions. The total cost of 15,600 for both, is that the total cost that, so the city's buying and paying for the actual stops and CT is maintaining them, or is there more to the cost than the 15,600?
No, we're basically just paying for the cost of materials and installation, which is that $15,600. Any ongoing maintenance or repairs, anything that they have to come out and address would be covered by community transit in this agreement.
So we're providing the bus stop and they're maintaining it.
It depends on what they're trying to do.
Correct.
And so I saw two pictures. One of them had a trash can, one of them didn't. And one of the concerns was littering. So do we know, is there going to be a place for trash?
If they were doing a new route, they would install.
I think that's a good question. I don't know for sure. We can follow up with that. But while I'm on this slide, this is approximately what the standard bus shelter would look like. So they've tried to design it in a way where it should in theory be easier to maintain. It would have a roof, have a bench for a couple of folks to be able to sit on. But I can follow up as far as the trash can question goes. I think that's a great thing for us to consider.
And then lastly, had to do with repairs and the 90-day termination. So if CT decides this location isn't working for them and they decide to terminate this and remove it, and we spent over $15,000 putting it there, is there going to be a reimbursement to the city if CT decides this isn't a location they like?
I think that's also a great question. I don't have the agreement pulled up in front of me to see what that language says. Director Halverson, do you happen to have that pulled up to see what it says? If not, we can follow up.
I do have it pulled up, but I think it's a fair question, but my expectation would be that there would definitely be a reimbursement. And again, we'll check with CT on that. That would not be fair dealings or fair dealing if they were to remove a shelter the city had paid for before the end of its useful life, the 10-year period. So let us do a little more work on that and get back to council.
Yeah, I would like that in writing, as well as a timeline for repairs. I mean, it's great that they're typically within a few weeks, but they're saying seasonally. Sometimes they're longer than that. These are part of the landscape of our city. And so I would like a contract with dates if we need something repaired, or if graffiti needs to be painted over, or something's going on that the city wants CT to address. I would like a timeline that CT must respond. We've had some issues with even other agencies within our city that there's problems, and then we're back and forth on who's going to fix them and when they're going to get fixed. And I would like to head this one off and not see that happen here.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So additional concern I have is the trash receptacles are not throughout the city, aren't regularly for community transit, aren't regularly maintained. And there's often garbage that flows out from them. So are they using the same vendor or contractor to maintain these two New City ones, or are we using the same ones? If we're using the same one, I have concerns about the frequency. Because I don't like walking past the trash and seeing trash when I drive by these sites where they're just not maintained and having crows come in and pull the garbage out because they're stuffed out and the garbage is coming out. Do we know? I don't recall seeing the specific language about the frequency of the trash removal. Is that, what am I
That is
missing?
something we can totally follow up on that as well and find out both the frequency and try to get more information about who their contractor is who assists with that or how they manage that.
Thank you. And the second one, the design, what design features will discourage loitering? Because often you see certain design features that encourage that. And we certainly don't want people feeling comfortable with those who are loitering in those areas that make it uncomfortable for people to use the space for its intended purpose.
I think that's another great question. There is some language in the current draft where we would have a chance to work with community transit on basically the final design. And what's here is just an example of one of their standard shelters that they've used in other communities.
Lori, this is
So
Gary.
again, we can try to follow up.
Lori, this is Gary. Just additional question of the facilities that community transit has installed around the city, Lundin Park down on Machias Road are two of them I can think of. Has the city paid for any of these previously?
I personally
guess I
don't
would
have the
say
information on that. Director Halverson, do you have any insight on that?
If it's associated with a capital project, the city likely paid for it. I can't speak to specific shelters on Lundin Parkway. I don't think that one was associated with the capital project. I have a very good feeling CT paid for its installation. So I think there's a bit of confusion about sort of the two buckets. So you have shelters that CT puts in on priority routes that are important to them and that they've prioritized. That's a bucket. And those are a lot of those shelters that you see around the city. And then there are shelters that the city wants in certain areas, downtown, some of our commercial sub areas. And this agreement's going to address that. So we're basically putting our hand up and saying, as a city, we have some areas where we want to have best shelters to encourage use of mass transit. This agreement allows us to do that. That doesn't preclude CT from putting in bus shelters elsewhere in the city based on their prioritization methods. So there's two different buckets, if that helps the understanding.
And 20th Street is not a priority transportation avenue or CT. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's not toward the top of their priority list.
Wow.
They've got the bus stop there now.
I know.
I
Yeah,
can
I
jump
know.
in a little
I
more
know-
context if you don't
Yeah.
mind. This is Kim Klinkers, the city engineer. So I know our team has been in contact with some contacts at Community Transit, specifically for Main Street down here. They do have existing bus stops with shelters. And it's been my understanding that we are coordinating with them. They're coming to remove the structures before construction. We are pouring the new sidewalks and constructing the pad so they can later come back. We're going to tell them when construction's done. And it sounds like they have limited funding and material. So that was kind of a warning that I heard from them, that they don't have a lot of these shelters readily available to come out and place them, but they are interested in getting them located throughout the city. And so when Main Street gets completed, we're going to contact them, and the expectation is that they're providing the shelter and will come in and install it along with their bus stop signs.
Well, we have limited resources as well. And there's one right out there that we didn't pay for.
Mhm.
So it's a benefit to community transit. They're nice to look at, but I'm wondering.
Well, and on
so
20th
community
Street, we
transit
already have
s-
one, the exact same spot. They're talking about putting one. We already have a bus stop. And there's been numerous challenges where I've called the police department myself because my business is close by. And I can see where people are, as Councilmember Ewing was saying, we're loitering and making it uncomfortable for people to use that bus stop. But there's already a bus stop there. So to invest over $7,000 of the city's money to replace one that's already there, is it dilapidated to the point that it's no longer useful?
I can maybe speak to that a little bit. A little bit of history about that specific stop. And Director Halverson, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that that stop is, or that shelter rather, is approximately 20 years old, and it was a volunteer project. My understanding is we had Eagle Scouts about 20 years ago that were very kind, and they came and installed it for us, but there wasn't a good mechanism for maintaining it. So the current shelter is not technically, it's not owned and maintained by Community Transit, and that maintenance has been falling on Public Works. And so I'm not able to speak to necessarily how much usable life is left with it, but that current design has been a little bit problematic as far as drawing the attention that you've called out, and then the maintenance that's required to keep it looking nicer.
So I guess at this point, I've heard a lot of questions. And so what are we thinking? I mean, there's a request for action. So I don't know if somebody is so inclined to make a motion, or if we have enough items here that we want to hear back on that we'd rather wait.
I'd prefer to get feedback from staff, Community Transit before I feel comfortable taking action.
I agree.
Okay. Lori, anything else that you or anyone else online would like to add?
We're happy to come back when we learn more and share maybe an updated draft with you all at a future council meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Lori, the name of the company that does the maintenance on a weekly basis is Town and Country.
Great. Thank you.
Does that company also do graffiti abatement? Because that's one thing that I guess in the contract I would like to see there, graffiti, because I see that as very common at these sites. And I just would like to see that addressed.
The only thing they do is they take trash away and they clean the glass. That's all they do.
All right. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Yeah, so feels a little out of order, but yes, that brings us back to, to council business. So I'll go ahead and start down with Councilmember Ewing.
No official business. I just wanted to recognize Public Works has been helpful in addressing an issue with some right-of-way, lack of permits and proper maintenance by some contractors in the city. And, citizens reported city staff going out there to address those concerns, and staff has followed up with that. So I just appreciate them being responsive to those issues.
Councilmember Shipman.
I attended the school board meeting on March 26th, and it was a packed meeting. It was at Lake Stevens Middle School, so the other side of the lake. And it was in the gym, and the gym was full. There was a huge turnout for the previous wrestling coach. And there was over an hour of public comments. And I just wanted to comment on how well that was handled by everybody involved. The people that were there in support of the coach, there were adults, there were kids, there were teens, there were teachers, there were other coaches, a large group of people. They kept to their 3 minutes. And if they were called upon that they were out of time, they wrapped it up and moved on. The school board itself did an outstanding job welcoming comments. After everybody who had signed up to speak had spoken, President Taylor asked, would anyone else like to share their thoughts? And then someone would, and they'd sit down, well, would anyone else like to share their thoughts? And this went on until, finally, everybody who wanted to speak had spoken. And I just wanted to comment on what an outstanding job was done both by the people that attended as well as the school board. It was impressive to watch. They also did a tour of LSMS, and I graduated a long time ago, and it was very reminiscent of the middle school I attended. So very much a throwback middle school. So it'll be exciting to see the improvements that the bond we'll have with that school, because that is one of the schools that's going to be improved. Because there were so many people there speaking for the coach, there were a lot of high school students there that also did the tour, and it was really heartwarming to hear them commenting, remember when, you know, and as we viewed is mainly the science department classrooms. And so it was really a good example of A, our schools need to some updating, and B, even with the aging buildings we have, the kids are still having a good time and creating some strong memories there. The other thing I wanted to mention is that they did accept a few bonds, grants. There was a grant from Stevens Creek PTA for a rocket project and the creation of a shoe closet. Also a grant from Stevens Creek PTA that'll be used for 2 Pacific Science Center assemblies. And so I wanted to bring notice to the PTAs awarding those grants. And then there was an acceptance of a student services grant from the National Association of Secondary School Principals, there's a mouthful, to one of our students for his Little Lights project. And I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Saeed Malhai, maybe? But anyway, I did want to mention that he was awarded a grant. And so I just think it's always a good thing when we receive funds for our school. Oh, and one last thing, the last day of school is officially June 20th.
Right. And my apologies, Council Vice President, old habits. You are responsible for running council business, right? So I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Councilmember Petershagen?
Yes, I attended the Utility Committee March 26th, which is the major point of discussion is item 9C, the interlocal agreement that was discussed and given direction to staff to formulate that. Also, congratulations to the Lake Stevens Rowing Club for the regatta this last weekend. On Saturday, I believe they had over 650 participants from around Puget Sound area of the youth. And then on Sunday was their master's program, and just counting the number of trailers out there and so forth, they probably had about 12 to 15 clubs from Seattle, mainly King County area and so forth. So very successful regatta for them. Yeah, Saturday's weather was perfect for rowing. Sunday, they got everything in before the rains came, but went down on Sunday and observed things and seemed like things were running very smoothly. So hats off to them.
Councilmember Daughtry?
I attended Community Transit Board of Directors meeting last week, and that's all I have to report.
And finally, Councilmember Donahue?
Nothing from me. Okay. Again, sorry about that. So that brings us to item 7, mayor's business, which obviously we will not have tonight. Item 8 is the consent agenda. So if everyone's had a chance to review that, could I please get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve this consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? Okay, consent agenda is taken care of. That brings us on to item 9A. So under action items, the first item is the gambling tax interest waiver from Matthew and Barb.
Yeah.
Turn it over to you.
Yes. Hi, I'm Matthew Heist. I'm the finance manager, and I'm filling in for Finance Director Stevens tonight. Our first action here is just as the March 11th council meeting was when we brought up this about the gambling tax. And at that point, you had waived interest for the companies that filed their gambling taxes. At the March 25th meeting, the council approved waiving taxes for businesses that did file. Since then, we've received a letter from one of the companies, which is Razzles Northwest. They're one of the companies that did not pay any taxes during that 3-year look back. And they are since then they have paid the taxes portion, and they are asking and seeking if they could have their interest penalty waived, which is about $2,881. So I'm just bringing that as I think as Finance Director Stevens has mentioned that we're just bringing these forward as they come as So this is just one of those that's being brought forward to the council to determine.
Matthew, I'm really puzzled by all this. What is the process of these folks? I just note in this letter, this party indicating that partly falls on the city for not notifying them for 3 years. Do we send out an annual notice, or is it completely upon those businesses to comply with this tax that they know nothing about?
So that's kind of as part of that process, we have gotten a list from the gambling commission. And then we've sent out letters, or we've sent out the forms to them. And then we just haven't had a process of following up on that. So I know with this individual that Razzles has been ownership has changed, and we've been sending it to the old owners. And they've never responded. And we were never notified that they were no longer in business. Or that they were no longer the owners of Razzles. At least the finance department has. So that's kind of where this person, that this instance had come up, where they were the new owners and weren't aware that they were supposed to be filing taxes to the city.
So every year you have to renew your business license with the state, which includes notification to the city, correct?
Correct.
And with that new business license, it would seem to be there would be some form of notification that a business entity has changed, ownership has changed, and we're just not picking that up, or like you say, we didn't have a process in place. I mean, it seems like, the city is notified of the business license. We pay a fee for it. And I guess, going forward, I hope we don't have this problem. It seems like if we got this problem on this issue, we may have other problems of not being able to pick this information up. So, as I said a couple of meetings before, I think it's kind of in the city's side of the ledger that it's, we're not really fulfilling what we need to be doing. And I appreciate your comments that we've now rectified that, but kind of makes me wonder if there's other issues that we're not covering that should be, that are out there, I guess. So I hope that's not the case, but.
So Matt, if I could piggyback off that, so Director Stevens said something that I want to clarify, is that these notices that are going out, these are extra, correct? I mean, I believe the base standard is the business is responsible for knowing the code and knowing what taxes they owe. Is that true?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so there is a base level of responsibility that does fall on the business. And then, I mean, in the case of the notices that were sent out prior, there was incorrect information. So essentially the city misled businesses. But as far as whether or not, business has to pay tax, period, that's on them to know. It's not up to the city to send them a note saying, hey, you have to pay tax now. Is that accurate, or am I missing something?
No, yeah, that's definitely my understanding as well. I do see, as we've, like I said, that we do, is that we do collect on a yearly basis something from the Gambling Tax Commission to identify that. And that was, I would say, probably to our fault, where when they do change ownership, we probably just we didn't recognize that that we just continued, because, a lot of times these people might notify us, hey, can you send it to this address, instead of what's with the Gambling Tax or the state commission. And so when we see there might be slight changes in the names and not really picking up that might be a different business or different address change, we've been notified that they wanted us to send it there. So there's some contributing factors that probably play into why we may have missed that. Certain businesses that aren't paying as well, and making sure that they're notified. And certainly something that we are working on updating that process. And again, I know that as Director Stevens has said, is that's with our soon to be senior accountant, that's one of the things that we want them to focus on to help us with these shortcomings that we have with looking at these types of things for us as well. So
If I was going to boil my question down, I guess it really comes down to, are we responsible for notifying them or are they responsible for paying?
I would say they would be responsible for paying.
Okay.
So when somebody pays for their annual business license or they renew their license, is there not a separate area that specifically requests a change of address? I know these things are done online, but I would think that part of the process would be checking a box that either A, the address has remained the same, or B, there's a new address.
Or a new entity.
Or a new entity. So if those weren't filled out when they electronically filed for their license, the city would not know if there was a change of address. Is there any way to look and verify how it was filed when they renewed their business license? Did they notify us of the new address when they removed their business or renewed their business license? Or was it kind of status quo where it's always been, and that's why it was mailed to the wrong place? Because if they updated it and we missed it, then, we've got to own that. But if they never updated their address, that's not on the city.
No, I think and I think the Gambling Commission has their physical address is what they send to us. So again, they may have changed the name. As far as the business license, I know that they do that through the Department of Revenue. And so we do have access to the Department of Revenue, and certain people do. And so I think there has been I can see there's probably been a lack of maybe communication between departments on those who would know more between the who would get more of those updates. And as finance has been we're very focused on making sure that we're getting the the monies that we're due. And trying our best to make sure that whatever changes that we're getting that updated. But sometimes that and something that we're definitely working on, if something changes and another department knows about it, there's hopefully we can be a better process of us being notified as well, that maybe there's a change on who's this information is being sent to.
I guess it feels like it's different than what the action item is, like this process here. I mean, I certainly appreciate the conversation. I'm supportive of us waiving the interest for Razzles Northwest. And I hope that this conversation has spurred us to make better processes going forward, so we don't repeat this in areas that could be potentially more costly. I certainly want to support our local businesses because it's a tough enough environment as it is. And so I think it's a reasonable request on the part. And we did not factor in the interest into our budget projections.
Is that a move to action?
Yeah, move to approve that. That we waived the fees in the amount of $2,881 for Razzles Northwest.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I do have some discussion, but I'll wait for anybody else first.
I would like to see what changes are going to be made so this doesn't happen again, because this isn't fair to our businesses because this is not a fun thing to have to write this letter to the city and ask for forgiveness for late fees and interest on something they didn't even know they owed.
Well, so I guess that's my concern. Is this, to me, feels different than the last round of businesses we discussed. And I think there's a middle ground here that I'll get to in a second. But what I'm leery of is establishing a precedent of, I didn't know I owed taxes. Can you please just wipe the slate clean, when it's ultimately the business's responsibility to know that. In the other cases, we sent out incorrect information. We affirmatively, sent them something that led them down the wrong path. And then all of a sudden we came back and said, oh, just kidding, you owe us way more. And they're like, that's not fair. But I'm concerned that if we go down this road, how many other businesses are going to say, oh, I didn't know I owed that. Can you please just waive it? And so kind of where my mind goes is, if we cut sort of the same deal here where we say, and Matthew, please chime in if this is just completely convoluted and not possible, but can we calculate late fees and interest based on 3%? Because that's effectively what we did for the other business, I believe, is we just said, hey, we're going to wipe the extra 2% plus all the interest and fees. Only in this case, can we calculate interest and fees based on the 3% rate instead of the new 5% rate? Because they didn't pay. There was interest that accrued and it was late, but I think the fair thing would be to give them the same 3% treatment that we gave the other businesses. So is that something that could even be done? Sorry, I can't see you. So if you're nodding.
Yeah, sorry. Well, yes, we can definitely pull that information.
Okay. Because I mean, and maybe I'm alone in this, but to me that the part about this being the city's fault, I mean, yes, it would have been nice to receive notices, but at the end of the day, the business is responsible for knowing the code, knowing what taxes they owe. And if the city didn't, it's not like we sent a note saying you don't owe any taxes and then, oh, surprise, you do. They just never got a notice. So the code is the default standard. So that's my thinking.
Can I actually update? Because this
please.
business did provide, because they only have to pay the net gambling taxes, and they provided further documentation for the whole period for the whole period of additional costs that they had to pay for these games. And they didn't break it out by quarter. So I guess it would make it a little bit more difficult, since I don't know which quarter they're attributed to. And since the interest is charged by quarter, so it would make it a little bit to have an accurate interest on based off of 3% and 5%. Sorry, I misstated that at first.
Okay.
Ryan, I guess to kind of counteract that a little bit, and Steve, I appreciate not belaboring this issue, but if we haven't received taxes from a known entity within the city for 2 or 3 years, it would seem to me that we would probably be going, hey, what's going on here? We haven't received after 18 months or something, or 2 years, we haven't received your payment. Are you still in business? Who owns this place? And reach out to those individuals. If you don't pay your taxes, the IRS definitely notifies you in a timely manner.
Yeah.
And it seems like we're the entity that is licensing this to a degree and have a tax on us, and yet we're not really taking any action to rectify the situation. So I agree, being naive about it is not the answer, but at the same time, we're not innocent in this thing either. So
yeah, and I'm not at all suggesting that, we don't look to improve. I think you're right. If we're going to send out these notices and we have that information, we should absolutely use it. But my concern is just kind of opening this door to, oh, I didn't know, sorry.
No, I hear what you're saying, Ryan, in that when you open a business, you know what taxes you should pay. And if you have a business that has a gambling license, you should be aware of all your gambling taxes. And I know it's a lot for a business owner to do, and that's why you hire a good accountant. And I also see Councilmember Peter Shagans where, are we sending out a reminder, hey, we haven't received your taxes? But again, by sending out those reminders, and if we send out for the wrong percentage like we did, then we write off thousands of dollars because we sent out 3% instead of 5%, when really we didn't have to send out anything. You know what I mean? So I guess for me, I see both sides of this coin. I'm a business owner. I wouldn't like to be blindsided by this stuff. But in the same token, as somebody who's a steward for the city and the monies the city is supposed to collect, I don't want to set up an example of, well, hey, the money's tight, the economy's hard. Let's just kind of skip on this and then just ask for forgiveness later. And not saying that anyone would necessarily even do that, but I think we are kind of setting up where that would be something that could be done. So again, I would like to get back to what is the city doing to make sure this doesn't happen again? And what is our process? If our process is we're going to be sending these out saying, hey, you haven't paid your gambling taxes or whatever tax we're talking about, What safeguards do we have that A, we're sending out the right information, and B, it's going to all the correct people? If it sounds to me like the addresses aren't necessarily updated to the city because they're going to different departments within the state. So the city's not actually being notified of the new address for these taxes. It just sounds a
Well,
bit tangled to me. I mean, am
How
I
many,
the only
how
one
many
that's kinda seen it
businesses in
that
Lake
way?
Stevens have to pay this tax?
I think right now there's about 7 or 8.
Okay, well, I agree with Gary that, Councilmember Peter Sagan, that, when we only have 7 or 8 of these businesses to track, it's pretty easy to track it. And we should have been saying, on an annual basis, how come you haven't paid your taxes yet?
Mhm.
And so I understand where you're going with that. I don't think it's going to be a problem because there's only 7 or 8 of them and we should be able to track it. And for the new process, that's great. On the item that's on the agenda, I too think that we should waive this one for this time and that it'll never happen again with only 7 or 8 of them. We have a gentleman in the audience right now that has one of these things. I know that they pay their taxes. And so I'm not going to ask him any questions except maybe offline. But if we can get the process going to where we understand that we're tracking this, because I think that's what's really happened. We never tracked it.
Right.
Okay, so we didn't track it. Shame on us. Let's just get this taken care of and never have it happen again.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at on this. So we have a first and a second. If there's any more discussion,
The last thing I'll say is just because I think it's pretty clear where the votes are going to go. On this case, everything in me wants to just say, yep, waive it, all that. But maybe the lawyer in me is just screaming precedent. So I'll just make that last comment before we go ahead and vote on this because I think I know how it's going to go. So there's nothing else. Then got a motion in a second. We've had discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All those opposed? Nay. Okay. Motion passes.
Oh, I said aye. Yeah, I voted yes.
Okay. So that brings us on to item 9B, the finance purchase cards, also with Matthew.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so our next subject is so finance, public works, and IT. We've been collaborating on solutions on providing employees the ability to make purchases and be able to maintain adequate oversight over that process. So currently, we have multiple avenues on how employees can make purchases, which include the use of credit cards, store accounts, store cards, check processing, things like that. And so there's this can be cumbersome for us in finance to be managing and then also cumbersome for employees deciding on how to make purchases when they need it. So we've been doing this since early last year, been doing this process of looking at how we can fix this. And we have found on I know this is something that Director Stevens has been wanting to start implementing it for a long time, but the purchase card or P card, or also known as procurement card system. And right now through US Bank and this is from the state bid, this program that we are looking at. The nice thing is that there's no additional costs to the city for us to implement this P card system, which essentially is a credit card program. It just has more robust oversight and management over that and allows us to have more control where, for example, if people need increases in limits, that would be something where staff who are in charge, administrative staff, would be able to make that, would be able to get online and do that to help the staff make those purchases when necessary. Currently, we have to call our current credit card company, and sometimes we have to wait so a long time to change credit limits sometimes. And we have to do a permanent change, and then we have to call them back and change it back down after that. So that process can be pretty cumbersome. but this would allow us to have that management right at our tips. Not only that is the program free, but it also provides a flat rebate of 1.35% for all purchases. And then also there's also a speed of payment incentive, depending on how quickly we can make the payments. So it's a 45-day payments that are 45 days to make a payment or in full to them. And starting on day one, it's that 0.44% extra. And then I think on day 44, you get 0.01% extra on those purchases. And then at 45 days, you don't get any additional incentive. So that might be also something we'll come back later for as we look at changing our processes to take better advantage of that stuff. So so in your packet, there is a purchasing card policy that we have created that would help us to that provide standards to the program and help provide direction to staff on the appropriate behaviors when using the cards. And I guess I know with the, there's areas in there that talk about limits for the staff and everything. And I know we've had some questions from other people. Not all staff are going to be required to have a purchasing card. This will be something that we plan on rolling out softly to staff. And then, but staff who want to make purchases we'll have to we hope to have them use the P-card system to take advantage of the rebates that we can get. To throw in the context, not that we are anywhere near the size, but I know King County, they use the P-card system and they have earned rebates of over $2 million just by doing that. So as a finance person, to me, this is a way that we can earn extra revenue without ever having to ask citizens or businesses to front that to us. Yeah, and so the first thing would be we really want to be able to authorize or to approve the purchasing card policy, and then authorize the mayor to enter into the agreements associated with US Bank to make this happen. So, any questions?
So maybe I missed it in there. Relative to our expenditures, how much money, since we aren't the size of King County and I don't expect $2 million in rebate based on our budget, how much money do you believe that will generate for our city?
Well, again, that really depends on how much we purchase, and we've been looking at to see on where we can move a lot of our like our check, like how much we pay with our checks and send it and paying with P-card instead. But as of right now, it would probably bring in a couple. In the first year, it could probably bring in anywhere between 10 and maybe 10,000, 20,000 to start off with. But I would hope I would want to make this as we continue to move forward to really make it more robust and be able to
get to that 2 million mark.
Well, yeah.
You gotta spend money to make money, Steve.
I know I've sat in some trainings with these as well, and there's actually been places that have been able, they've earned enough to where they actually have a purchase card manager. They've hired a new staff member that is paid directly from those rebates and allows them to get further. And that's a school district that does that, but you know, it's definitely you can definitely make it. There's a lot of options, I would say, and hopefully, you know, we really want to look at this and take full advantage of the program.
So I have a couple of questions, and you know one's coming because you guys discussed it. Why is this coming to the council? Is it because of the contract that has to be signed with US Bank, or is it, if this is just a procedural thing, why does it have to come to the council?
It's because of the nature. It's a finance of the policy actually needs to come to council, is my understanding, because it's
a financial policy.
Correct. And so we've just also want to make council and get your authorization for the mayor just to be able to sign these documents as well for that.
The next question I have is, how does this affect the vouchers?
Well, it would affect, like our.
In other words, we're not going to see line items from this. We're going to see a line item in the voucher that's just paying US Bank.
Well, I think that's kind of where where we are doing more research into that, but with Springbrook, because they do say that they allow the inputting of P card systems, and the idea is that it would show that it would show the business that we paid to instead. And I think we'd have to modify a little bit in Springbrook on how we process that, but I think that's one of the things I don't like about our current system is that what you just see is the perk of us paying the credit card company and it doesn't necessarily say which companies that we're paying, things like that. I mean, I know you have the details of all that stuff, but they do say that we are able to work with that, and so that you will be able to see not only the US Bank payment, but see who it was purchased to as well.
So I had a similar question as far as, why is this in front of us? Because if it needs our approval, I guess one of the things that I'm having trouble reconciling are these limits. Because I mean, there's limits posted for positions here, but then right below that, it basically says, the finance director can approve temporary or permanent increases to individual cards. So once we approve this, apparently it's financial enough that it needs the council's approval, but then after that, we never see anything about these limits, or, maybe depending on how it's broken out, line item spending again. Is that correct, or am I missing that?
I think the intention is just to help set standard levels for people as like an expectation for as people come in, and there's always circumstances where we would need to raise those limits, and certain people purchase quite a bit, have their purchases are going to be a lot more significant than like I know IT, they with all the for example, for all the software programs and things like that, we would probably expect that they would need that. So that just gives us the, I guess, more of a framework to be, if a new employee starts with us and they need a purchase card, that's where their level would be at. And if it needs to be more, we as finance, we would expect a sufficient reasoning that would for an increase, for a permanent increase. I guess that's one of the issues that we do run into, is that with the current limits today that we do have, is that we're frequently getting called, and we have to make decisions to increase limits as well. So it definitely giving us the flexibility, I think, or as finance, to help manage that.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand that from a business perspective. And I mean, honestly, I feel like we as a council, we put a lot of faith and trust in our finance department as is, because you guys do a great job. And my thinking on this isn't so much, am I not going to know what's going on with this? It's who's going to be sitting in this seat after I'm gone. And so I guess I'm wondering, is there a way to amend the policy so that there's some sort of regular check-in with council? I don't even know what time frame that would be under, but just something so that there's a periodic review, so whoever comes after me isn't, one day just like, wait, our credit card limits are how much, and caught off guard by that. So is this policy kind of take it or leave it, or is it still open to maybe tweaking a little bit?
I'm sure we could still tweak it.
Okay. And I mean, I don't know if anyone else has similar thinking, or if that's just me.
I was just wondering, with these cards, are we going to be incurring transaction fees? With checks, there's not usually transaction fees, but when using any kind of bank card, often there's up to a 3.5% transaction fee. So, is that applicable to this?
And that's where we would have to make sure, and yes, there, you could potentially get to 3.5%. But where we would, obviously, we wouldn't want staff to be incurring additional costs, just to use the P card. The P card, it would be, making sure that we're only doing this with places, like I know, currently, there's certain utilities that we can pay where they don't charge extra for that, but there are other utilities that do charge for a credit card fee. So we wouldn't pay those utilities with the credit card.
Because with a flat rebate of 1.35%, if you're paying 3% transaction fee, we're not really making anything on the flat rebate.
Yeah, you don't, yeah, certainly. And that's definitely where we would make sure that we're not accruing. We don't want people to accrue the 3% or 3.5% just to earn 1.35% on that purchase. That wouldn't make sense. That would be more exceeding that.
So I'm not so sure that question got answered. Does US Bank have a 3.5 transaction fee on everything we do?
No.
Okay. I think that's what the question was.
Was-
okay.
My
Not
question
US
was
Bank.
typically if we're using vouchers and checks or bank transfers, something like that, typically there's not a transaction fee. Anything that's a bank card, even a debit card that's a bank card, is oftentimes there's a transaction fee of upwards to 3.5%. And so if we're handing these cards out and we've got spending limits, and all this makes sense as far as, seems like a much more streamlined way to do things. But at the end of the day, those individuals are using those cards for various purchases. My concern is the transaction fees are going to outweigh any of the flat rebate. So that's not a big sell for me unless we're saving staff time. Now, if we're saving staff hours because this is streamlining things, you know what I mean, then that should be factored in too. But just that the rebate's not selling it for me because so oftentimes there's a transaction fee larger than what the rebate is.
We currently have a credit card. We currently hold credit cards. And so staff currently right now, if they do, they could potentially be accruing that 3.5%. If all currently as it stands. So this process would be, and I as in finance, I certainly don't like to see that. And I know if I do see that, typically I'm asking why we needed to go in that particular order, why we needed to pay that 3.5% instead of going through our check processing system. So that is currently right now that there are with our current credit card systems, that is a risk, I suppose, that we do take, that we still are paying at that moment.
And do we track that? Do we track what our processing fees are?
No, we don't keep a tally of.
So there's not a line item of those to know whether they significantly go up or down? Because with this being more convenient, it sounds like our card use is going to go up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's an expense that might be worth tracking if we're using a 1.35 rebate as part of an incentive to go with this program. I think that might be a valid thing to kind of, keep track of. Just from a business perspective. I'm a small business owner.
Yeah.
I'd like to call for the question, please.
Okay, question has been called. So can I get a motion? Kelly, do we need two separate motions or can one motion handle?
No, I think this stops discussion. So
Yeah.
we'll,
Or I mean, as far as, so it looks like we've got approving the policy and then authorizing signing of the agreement.
Yeah.
So does that need to be two separate motions
Oh,
or
one, it can be one motion.
one motion? Okay.
They go together, so.
Okay.
So I'll move to approve policy 303.
Second.
Wait, sorry. So we've got approval of the policy and authorizing the mayor to sign.
That's part of the policy 303.
Yeah.
Is sign. Okay.
Is that correct, Kelly? Is that?
I'm sorry that I don't have the staff report right in front of me. I think that you need to approve the policy and then authorize the mayor
Okay.
to sign the associated documents with US Bank.
And authorize the mayor to enter an agreement associated documents with US Bank.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. I've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nope. Guess it's just my night. As a no. Okay, so that brings us to item 9C, the interlocal agreement for the 131st Avenue Northeast Sewer Extension Developer Extension Agreement with Aaron Halverson, who I'm assuming is still online.
Good evening, council. I am,
okay.
Aaron is still online and is available. I'm gonna try to give it a shot first and we'll try to make it quick. I know there's been a lot of good discussions so far this evening, so I can start it off. Can you see my screen? My name's Kim Klinkers. I'm the city engineer, and as I mentioned, Director Halverson is on the call as well. I wanted to just first update one minor edit to the staff report. As you can see on my screen here, the number that's highlighted in purple, 363,250, should read 572,361. And this is consistent with all of the numbers that are in the attached ILA, specifically Exhibit E. I'm happy to go through any of those if you had other questions, but I will keep it brief. I know we've talked about this ILA with the sewer district for the 131st project multiple times, and we're excited to bring this current version to you because it's been very collaborative. We've had a lot of discussions. It's been to the Joint Utility Committee meeting, and we think it's a good final draft for you to consider. We do have a requested action this evening to ask the council to authorize, I think in this case, it would be the mayor pro tem to sign this interlocal agreement if it's looking good for today. Is that a surprise? I can explain that a little bit further. So I will just provide a quick update since the last time we talked about this, and then I'll open it up for questions. So our city administrator Brazel met with General Manager Lowe on March 7th to kind of talk about how we can move this forward and be collaborative and make it beneficial to the city and the sewer district to get this project constructed because it's been a little challenging to get to an agreement. So on March 8th, the sewer district provided a new ILA template to the city for consideration. On March 18th, the city worked with our legal counsel and we provided 2 drafts for the sewer district to consider. One of the ILA listed 50% of the sewer related construction costs to be paid or reimbursed by the sewer district. And then the other option was 100% of the sewer related costs to be paid by the sewer district. In general, we came to an agreement that the design costs would be covered by the city, which is about $100,000 for the sewer related design so far. So both the ILAs were discussed at the Joint Utility Committee meeting on March 26th. And there was discussion and agreement that we would move forward with the 50% cost sharing agreement. So last week on April 2nd, we received a final draft of the ILA from the sewer district after their legal counsel had reviewed the draft with the 50% cost sharing. Our legal counsel has reviewed it as well. Staff has reviewed it. I'm happy to answer any specific questions about it, but if council is comfortable with it and would like to recommend signature, the next steps would be I would get the mayor pro tem to sign and we'd get it notarized. I would deliver the hard copy to the sewer district tomorrow and they would include it in their packet for their board meeting on Thursday. They've agreed to get it recorded on Thursday afternoon, and then they're able to move forward with sending us comments on the final plans and specs by this Friday, which is what we need for one final revision. So we can pull this project together, get final permits and get it out to bid. We're targeting May of this year. So we have a path forward. I think that's quickly what I wanted to highlight. I did hear from Councilmember Peter Shagan, there was just some questions about one of the exhibits, and I looked into that a little bit and can share my screen. So specifically the project area that's shown here, at the last time this was discussed at council, there was questions about the northern limit and why it wasn't extended all the way to Hartford. And we did talk to the sewer district about this, and we talked with the engineer that helped us design the final plans that we have. The sewer main as it's designed, the low point is down near 20th, and it gets shallower and shallower as we move north towards Hartford. And at the north point here, it does, I think the sewer district has a standard of 7 feet of minimum cover above their sewer main, and we are right at that limit here at the north limit to be able to have a structure and gravity feed down to 20th. We did review and discuss with the sewer district in their comprehensive plan that they have additional projects identified north of Hartford that would gravity feed and potentially have a lift station on Hartford to service the area further into the industrial area. We did talk with our engineering consultant, and they were thinking that there might be opportunity to actually have a gravity main go north and connect over to Machias, where there's already a lift station targeted. But we are still able to add some pipe in there just as a conduit if there's ever a need to connect a future force main into the gravity system. But looking at the next exhibit for the reimbursable area map, the green area where we would be constructing the improvements does serve all of these lots along 131st, with the north limit being Hartford. I think those were the kind of the high points I wanted to touch on. I'll open it up if there's any questions from council or numbers you would like me to, I can talk through the numbers that are attached in Exhibit E in the back of the ILA if you'd like.
Just to clarify, Kim, the 4.3 connections, that's was determined based on the equivalent residential unit of the Public Works facility. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. Yes, I did read through the ILA, and I think that there's some credits and some equivalent residential units identified in here by the sewer district.
Yeah, 4.3. So based on square footage or something of that sort or whatever.
Correct. We did pull a title report, and we provided the usable square footage, I think, to the sewer district for them to come up with that amount.
And then the other question, we had talked previously about there was a separate cost agreement that had to be finalized. Is that no longer?
It's my understanding. Yeah, I think initially we were trying to get a DEA from like their standard DEA that they normally do for developers. We were trying to get that authorized, and that we were running into roadblocks. So it's my understanding that this is the one document that's the interlocal agreement.
This is the only document that's needed for them to agree to so that we can move forward.
That's my understanding. And I think Director Halverson is on the call, and I would be happy for him to confirm that that's the case.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I mean, the attachment is named DEA ILA.
Yes, we got it all in there.
But
Yes.
sorry, Ryan,
Right.
you weren't at the meeting.
Yeah, sorry. Just that one.
But there was a discussion about, there was these two separate documents
Right.
that needed to be, one had to happen before the other and
Okay.
all that stuff.
And so the current draft that we have here still, the sewer district is still providing a project general facility charge credit in the amount of $58,000. And that's in excess, in addition of the up to $600,000 that they've committed to for construction funding. And then in addition, the city is eligible for the next 15 years to latecomers fees for their proportionate share of their costs that are related to this project. So it seems like it's a good win-win.
I'll make a motion to approve the interlocal agreement for 131st Avenue Northeast Sewer Extension Developer Extension Agreement.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I do. So given the nature of the relationship between the city and the sewer district, I guess the question is, what precedent do we have with recent precedent with this type of agreement, and how likely is it to be carried out in the manner it's prescribed in the agreement?
That's a good question.
I don't know who's going to answer that one for you.
I mean, I'm just asking because just one example says they'll pay within 30 calendar days of receipt of the report invoice. And just given the nature of the ongoing things have been going on for years, why would we agree on something like this and we can't agree on some other things that seem to be more concrete?
If I may,
Thank you.
Please.
I think it's in the best interest of the city and the district to get this thing done, this improvement of the sewer line done, because what it does is gets public works off septic, allows us to expand that footprint up there, which would accommodate the sewer district and some of their needs. So it's in both parties' interest to facilitate and accomplish this and get it done. So that's the sales pitch, I guess, to you.
And I'd be happy to add, I think there's been some very constructive conversations offline with our city administrator, Brazel, and general manager Lowen and her team. We want to try to make it collaborative. I know we have this unified agreement to extend sewer into the industrial area. And I feel like it's been a positive tone, and we're really trying to get to yes and be collaborative. So I have positive hopes that we'll fulfill our terms and they'll fulfill their terms of this agreement.
I think there's strong capabilities with both entities. I just, when they're not working together, and working for their own interests, it sometimes doesn't make for a positive outcome. And so if what Councilmember Petershagen shared, I'd be very hopeful that that would be a positive outcome and a benefit both. But I guess I'm put on my skeptical hat and kind of look through the lens of the last 6 years that I've been on council and kind of see that, hopefully this will be a good precedent for us.
I'd like to withdraw the motion I made since I did that incorrectly. So hopefully the seconder of that motion will acknowledge that.
Acknowledge.
And I would like to authorize the mayor to sign the interlocal agreement for the 131st sewer extension agreement between the Lake Stevens Sewer District and the City of Lake Stevens in accordance with the Unified Sewer Services and Annexation Agreement dated May 23rd, 2005.
Second.
Okay. Let Kelly finish writing here. Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you, council. All right, I think you get us for the last item as well, but I'll
Where are we at
agree to
now?
introduce it.
Okay. Yes. Item 10A, the Transportation Benefit Program Implementation Plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right,
Yes,
please
thank
take
you.
it away.
So I'll run through the slides, and then Ben Romanaggi, our senior civil engineer, is here as well if you have any specific technical questions. I will try to keep this brief as well, but feel free to interject with any questions as we go through it. There in your council packet, there is a Transportation Benefit Program Implementation Plan that we've prepared, and I have a few slides just to provide a summary of that document. So quickly, here's an overview of the topics. We'll do an introduction, discuss key elements of the TBP, what evaluation criteria were considered to select these projects, show you a list of the projects and their current statuses, show you a project delivery schedule for the next 10 years, quickly overview funding resources, and then touch on notification and outreach and wrap it all up with a summary. So quickly, I think you're pretty well familiar with this program, but as an introduction, for those who might not be, the Transportation Benefit Program will generate approximately $1.5 million per year for 10 years to improve the city's transportation system. This is funded by a 0.2% sales tax that was passed by Lake Stevens voters in 2022. And we had a community survey prior to the vote and the proposition where we had 900 respondents, and 51% were really interested in more sidewalks, 37% were looking for road improvements, including pavement preservation, and 12% were looking for more multi-use paths. So some key elements of the Transportation Benefit Program are, we have a list of 20 prioritized sidewalk and non-motorized projects. And I want to just quickly touch on what non-motorized and multimodal improvements mean to us, because it might not be well known. In general, we are trying to target pedestrians, specifically kids walking to school was a criteria that scored high for missing sidewalks near schools. But also we're trying to provide facilities for bicyclists, families with strollers, people in wheelchairs or other motorized scooters. And sometimes just providing on-street bike lanes can cause safety concerns when we have vehicles traveling near, just adjacent to them at high speeds. And then also if we have on-street parking, that doesn't play well with bike lanes. So in some cases, providing wider off-street improvements like a shared use path will provide dedicated and protected space to vulnerable road users. So that's some options when we talk about non-motorized projects. It's not just a standard sidewalk and bike lane on the street. We're trying to have the right project for the right roadway and the right users. So in addition to the sidewalk projects, there's several key roadway upgrade projects that are focused on Main Street, 91st Avenue Northeast for our commercial revitalization, and 79th Avenue Southeast, which is an access road that will serve Cavallaro. Furthermore, about a third of the annual funding, $500,000, is allocated specifically to pavement preservation. And all of these projects are supporting the TBP, and we're really focusing on safety, connectivity, and multimodal improvements. So I think you've seen this before, but we just wanted to provide a reminder that the sidewalk projects that were selected were all scored and evaluated with this specific criteria, and this is attached in the appendix in the implementation plan. But we were considering such things such as zoning and roadway type and what facilities were nearby these projects, the costs, and some grant eligibility. And the individual project scoring is attached in the appendix if we want to look in depth with the numbers and the scoring. So here we have our project list, and we wanted to just provide a quick status of where we're at going into 2025. On the left, we have our 20 sidewalk projects, and on the right are our complete street roadway improvement projects. The gray ones are on hold for different grant applications, most notably TBP 5, which is on 91st Avenue Southeast, which is south of Lake Stevens Middle School to 20th. We're waiting. We think that we have a high likelihood of receiving an $800,000 grant from WashDOT for safe routes to school. I think we'll hear about that in the next few months. And then last year, you're aware that we completed 2 of the 91st Avenue Southeast projects, TBP 2 and 3, which was north of North Lake Stevens Middle School. And then the ones in yellow are currently in design or under construction. Main Street is Main Street's under construction, and we are advancing the design with the roundabout that will be at the north end of Main Street. And then we'll have another large annual pavement preservation project this year. Any questions yet with the current project list?
That sheet is, I don't believe, in our packet. Can you email that to us?
Absolutely, yes, with the status.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I think.
TBT project list and status.
Yes, we can email that out. I think hopefully in the implementation plan, we have the project list there with the limits, but it would be nice to have we could do a current status for where we're at in 25. I believe this is in your packet. So this is just a overall summary of a project delivery schedule. And this is showed for the next 10 years on how, with the current information that we have, we're projecting to deliver these projects. And we just wanted to highlight that there's multiple factors that were considered when we were scheduling these and balancing available funding. We did consider the scoring, as we already touched on. We're also looking at available funding, staff capacity for design and construction, coordination for projects requiring right-of-way when we need to widen and purchase property from homeowners. That does take some time and some coordination and negotiating. Also, we take into consideration utility upgrades and relocations. So this is when we're looking at our stormwater pipes and assessing the condition and determining if we should upgrade pipes or provide additional treatment before coming and paving a road. And then other service adjustments are factors that we take into consideration, such as bus stops and where the mailboxes are and how solid waste will be taken care of. And then I'll touch a little bit more on external grant funding. But this updated project list was recently reevaluated with current project cost estimates. We have measured quantities and we have current unit prices that consider the material availability and other industry constraints. And we're trying to balance that with the projected funding and the other items listed here on how these will be delivered over the next 10 years.
Kim,
Yes.
is there any place that we have that we can, or we can be sent what the, let's say TBP number 20 is? What is the actual project? What are we doing?
So I am building a website for each of the TBB projects in Zen City. So soon you'll be able to go to each project and be able to see exactly what we are doing for that project. Some of those that are further away, like TBB 20, have not been built yet, but will be built in the future.
Okay.
Okay. But to specifically answer your question, I think we do have limits and some concepts about what that project, all of these projects were intended to, what the scope would be. And that's how we kind of have the quantities and the cost estimates. So we should be able to export all that data and share with you the development of this list. I just wanted to quickly touch on one of our projects that we completed last year. So this was along 91st Avenue. We completed TBP 2 and 3. And just to highlight that this was one project that we were able to secure TIB grant funds. So this is state complete street funds, and it was able to fund about 30% of the project. And that will lead us into our funding resources, which is outlined in our implementation plan as well. We wanted to highlight that we are utilizing local funding tools to extend our TBP dollars, specifically traffic impact fees and fee in lieu contributions come from development. And we do have a timeline on when those can get spent. So we are trying to prioritize utilizing those when we can. We also have real estate excise tax that can be used for these projects. And then stormwater contributions when we have stormwater improvements. Right now, we're assuming about 15% of the construction cost will be funded by the stormwater fund. And then there's other external funding that we're currently tracking. We have we've completed several grant applications this past year. And as I mentioned, we have one promising one that we're waiting to hear back from. In general, we're pursuing state grants through WashDOT. They offer safe routes to school and pedestrian bike programs. And then TIB is another example of state funding that we received last year with the Complete Streets program. And then we are tracking the larger federal programs and coordinating with the Puget Sound Regional Council. The current project delivery schedule assumes about 35% of the funding will come from external sources. So it is a primary focus that we're actively tracking and trying to be competitive in so we can deliver these projects on time. We wanted to touch on notification and outreach. The sign that's here looks familiar, and we'll continue creating these and using these out on site as projects advance towards construction to highlight the TBP funds and what they're going towards. But in general, as Ben mentioned, we do have a TBP website. We're trying to keep that updated with the most current information. We'll attach our implementation plan to that, which is just what we recently developed. We also plan on providing annual progress reports to City Council, and we're continuing to coordinate with utility and service providers that are listed there. We're up in our game with public engagement and figuring out the right time and method to engage the public with notices, public open houses, surveys. We have the dedicated project websites, and then during construction, we'll be more focused on providing signage on site and social media and the door hangers. So this is our last summary slide, and then we'll just open it up to questions. Just wanted to highlight the takeaways here. So the TBP aims to improve our multimodal transportation infrastructure. where community input and voter approved funding are guiding the program. We're shooting for a collaboration across departments and agencies to ensure effective project delivery. Transparent communication and public engagement are key to the program's success. Strategic use of funding maximizes the value and impact of the public dollars spent, and the enhanced transportation network improves quality of life for residents and visitors. And I thought this was a good opportunity just to remind everybody that we do have 2 upcoming public open houses, specifically for the 116th and 117th project that we've talked about several different times. Tomorrow is the first one. It'll be here at the Mill on April 9th from 3 to 6. And then we have one scheduled on site next Monday, April 14th from 2:30 to 6:30. We're specifically trying to be there when school gets out and target walkers and drivers around that area. We have heard a concern or two that maybe it's not late enough. And so please reach out and let us know if people want to stop by later than 6 or 6:30. We will be happy to hang around and meet with anybody that wants to meet with us at the open houses. Otherwise, you're able to reach out. Ben is the project manager, and we are happy to respond to emails or take phone calls or meet people if this time doesn't work for them. So those were the quick highlights of the attached plan. We can provide more specific project information in terms of the improvements and the limits and descriptions about what was listed just in those brief tables, is what I heard from Councilmember Daughtry. Are there any other questions or concerns right now that we can answer?
So I have a couple. I had a citizen reach out, or actually multiple, about the managing the weather for just being out in the open for that. And they were wondering what, and I said I didn't have a response for what that's going to look like. I imagine we will be providing some kind of shelter for those so they're not exposed to the elements.
We do have tents available for all participants, so we'll have sandwich boards on it. And if the weather does get worse enough, I have rented the Mill as well as an alternative place, and we can reach out to people to make sure that they are able to get to the Mill as well if that does not work.
And was Pastor Benson able to provide any accommodation for his space at the Ebenezer Lutheran?
I talked with Pastor Benson, and they had some very good comments about the project. Unfortunately, due to their food drives and some other events, they weren't able to provide any accommodations for us.
Thank you. The other question, I guess I looked at the budgetary portion of that. I didn't see the dollar amount for the 117th because the dollar amount that we have allocated for that year, the project cost for the 117th, as it's presently set forth, is significantly more than what our budget allows. So I'm not clear on what numbers we're using. I believe the number for the 117th is 2.6 million. And so I'm sure I'm missing something.
I don't mind trying to jump in here. I know it's hard I had a couple backup slides prepared. So what we approved last year at the end of last year in fall for our 2025 budget, we do have 117th Avenue sidewalks here. We have currently $300,000 budgeted for this year. And the intent was that we were going to be advancing the design, and we were targeting $1.2 million in 2026 for construction. And then I think last year in December was when we first presented to council this alternative idea to do the one-way couplet potentially and have traffic in one lane and pedestrians in the other lane, with the idea that there's significant cost savings and doubling the benefit. So I guess what's currently budgeted is $300,000 for this year. What is included in the implementation plan right now for 117th is $181,000. And I did ask Ben just to be prepared to speak specifically about what that number represents currently, and he can elaborate on that if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one last question. So our last financial report, the 3%, assuming a 3% increase in sales tax revenue, last year we failed to meet that target. And with the softening economic environment that we're currently in, I don't expect us to hit anywhere near the 3% growth within the city. We missed it last year. So we've had some pretty robust growth, during COVID, but that's softened considerably. So I just want to make sure that we're mindful of those adjusted numbers and that we're taking that into consideration when we're making our projections. I just don't see us hitting that 3% target unless, we have some other significant revenue sources join our business environment.
I appreciate that feedback. I think the last time we reached out to the finance director, it was my understanding that was kind of what the assumptions were moving forward, but it will be good for us to check back in with her and understand what her projections are moving forward, especially as we get further years out. But I think as mentioned in the implementation plan document for the TBP sales tax revenue, that was our assumption was just a constant 3% inflation to project our revenue estimates.
Thank you.
What about the cost estimates? Is there an escalation factor in this? This is page 127. I'm assuming you got some escalations in there for
Yeah. There is
2028,
escalation
29.
costs for each of those projects. So each of those projects is assuming a 4% escalation cost per year for all materials and construction, everything.
Okay. So I guess as far as the pavement preservation, wouldn't that apply to that line item also?
So the pavement preservation is every year we're taking a flat $500,000,
Right.
but that is something we could investigate to see how those dollars could be spent better and if that should be increased or not.
Okay.
I guess to your point, Gary, that means that we're addressing 4% fewer or
Yeah.
less each year and
Well, I guess that kind of leads me on to my bonding comment in the sense that, maybe it's better to take care of some of these roads now rather than later. And because if we're only anticipating 500,000 in pavement preservation in the year 2032, who knows what it's going to be? But I venture to say it's going to be fairly more expensive than what it is today.
Yeah, that's a good point. I believe the resolution specifically identified $500,000 annually off the top for pavement preservation. But I will add that we have an additional $400,000 from the streets fund. That was what we had existing for pavement preservation. So last year, I think was the first year that we had the standard 400 and then the additional 500,000 from TBP for about $900,000. So it definitely significantly doubled our program, but I appreciate your concerns about in future years that same amount's going to do less moving forward. So that would be a good question for us to touch base with finance on, see how we can
Right.
reward
And
that.
you indicate 400,000 from capital, right? Is that what
Correct.
you said?
Yes,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
from the streets fund.
I guess I would say, maybe we shouldn't get into this. But the utility tax is kind of anticipating some, I guess, movement maybe of, fixing things as we go, which probably would get into pavement preservation also. You're not just going to do the ring around the manhole. When we do that, there may be other things that could be improved along the way.
Yes,
So-
I related to that, I think our operations and maintenance team is specifically looking at pavement grinding and some hot mix equipment, potentially funded partially with the utility sewer tax. So that would help assist with our pavement preservation and be mutually beneficial as well. So there's opportunity there.
Okay, great. Hopefully these numbers improve as the years go by.
One more thing is that there's currently we don't have the local funds in here just because there are funds like the TIZ and other funds which are available but are not implemented currently just due to their kind of fickle nature of we can't predict exactly where they are and what region they may not apply to current projects.
Okay. The only request I would have is could we get a spreadsheet of the grants that we have applied for, the status and what we are also anticipating applying for?
Absolutely. I believe Olivia has been
Okay.
She's got
keeping
that.
that up to date, so we can provide an
Okay.
update with that.
It's just helpful when it says it's applied for numerous grants. It'd be kind of nice to know a little more detail as to what we're
Sure.
out doing. So,
Yeah, one of the things that I've said before, and I want to say it again, and I know you had PSRC up there, but I'm on the PRSC Transportation Policy Board, and I never see Lake Stevens on any of the money we're giving away, millions and millions of dollars every year. So I know we say we're looking at it, but what the heck why aren't our names on there? I mean, there was one a few months ago, but I see other cities getting a lot of money from
Yeah.
federal funds through PSRC transportation, and I just don't see our name on there very often.
Yeah, I agree. We can be more competitive. We need to get applications in to have the chance. I think the Main Street project that we're working on right now is funded through federal dollars that we've received through PSRC, but yeah, it's the
Okay.
balance. We have to have large enough projects to make it worth the additional time and burden with federal funds, but
Aaron Halverson has his hand up.
Oh, thank you. I just want to make two points. I think Councilmember Daughtry's point is a good one with PSRC funding. Like Kim said, we have some funding already, but I would say that we are at capacity for project delivery with the staff resources we have. So the constraint right now is actually project managers to deliver projects. And that's going to become more acute as these projects get to construction this summer and next summer. So that's something to be mindful of. And then the other point was, I think it was Councilmember Peter Shagan mentioned bonding for pavement preservation. I actually think that's a good idea. And I think that we should run the analysis on that and see if it might be to our benefit to bond for the duration of the pavement preservation funds that we'll receive through the TBP funding, and see if we can do a large project next year and just basically spend all of that funding in 1 or 2 years. Because I think we'll get more for our dollar if the bond rates are right. So I can promise that we'll take a look at that and see if there's something there.
Okay, any other questions?
So when should we expect to see that analysis along with the pavement preservation project list and the status of the project? Because I guess at my point, when Gary has mentioned that, I think of like Lundin Parkway, we have full-size semi-trucks driving down that, concrete trucks that are just destroying that road. And since the roundabouts have gone in, that road is degraded significantly because it's now like almost like Highway 9 as far as the use of it and the types of trucks and vehicles are on that. And so I just want to make sure that we're ahead of the curve and that we're exploring all options that we have available to us to deliver the maximum value for, the resources that we have.
Yeah, I think that we can get that analysis back to council in the next 3 months, and it will dovetail really nicely with the budget, if that works.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I believe we have a quick announcement.
Real quick, just looking ahead at council meetings. So next week's meeting on April 15th is a workshop. However, we're dedicating that meeting to Mayor Gailey's State of the City address. So that'll be in this room at 6 o'clock. There's already information out about it. It's open to anyone who'd like to attend. We'll also record it on YouTube. Looking at the meeting after that on April 22nd, we're planning to cancel because of the retreat being that same week. So reminder, retreat Thursday, April 24th. Working on getting that packet out the Friday before on the 18th. And then we have a 5 Tuesday month in April. So we aren't planning to meet again until May 6th. So unless something changes or something urgent comes up, I'll certainly let you guys know, but that's the plan for now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, looks like we've covered everything. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.